There is a strange pattern in how we react to certain kinds of harm. If someone breaks your phone, you are annoyed. If someone breaks your arm, you are angry. But if someone humiliates you publicly, reduces you, strips you of dignity, the reaction is different. People say things like, "That should never be done to a human being. They went too far. That was degrading. Notice what is missing." No one says this about objects. No one says a chair was humiliated. No one says a machine was degraded. Even when there is no physical injury, people demand apologies. They speak of violation, of losing something invisible but essential. And here is the quiet tension. Many of us say humans are just advanced biology, complex animals shaped by evolution. So why do we react as if something sacred was touched? Not sacred in a religious sense. Sacred in how we behave. That is the question we are going to sit with. Intro. There is a word people use when something goes wrong in a very specific way. Not broken. Not damaged. Not injured. Violated. People use it after public shaming. After abuse of power. After someone is reduced in front of others. After a line is crossed that everyone somehow recognizes. What is strange is that violation does not require physical harm. Nothing has to bleed. Nothing has to break. Yet something is said to be taken. We hear phrases like, "They stripped him of his dignity. She was treated like an object. They dehumanized her." Notice the language. Object. Human. Stripped. These are not technical terms. They come from how people experience the event. And this reaction appears everywhere. Across cultures. Across belief systems. Across religious and non-religious worldviews. Now place this beside a common modern claim. That human beings are just biological organisms. Highly complex animals shaped by evolution. No special essence. No built-in meaning. No metaphysical status beyond matter and energy arranged in a certain way. Many people sincerely hold this view. And they hold it thoughtfully. But then something interesting happens. When a person is humiliated, abused, or reduced, even those who deny any deeper status react as if something inviolable has been touched. Not sacred in a religious sense. Sacred in how people behave. This video is not an argument. It is an observation. We are going to look carefully at how people actually respond to dehumanization. Then we will ask whether a purely biological account fully explains that response. Not to attack atheism. Not to smuggle theology in through the back door. But to sit with a tension that appears in ordinary human life. Part 1. The everyday experience of humiliation. Humiliation has a particular texture. It is not just pain. It is not just fear. It is not just embarrassment. It is the experience of being lowered. People describe it as being exposed, reduced, turned into something less than oneself. This happens in small ways. A teacher mocks a student in front of a class. A boss publicly shames an employee. A video of someone's worst moment spreads online. And it happens in extreme ways. Prison abuse. Sexual violence. Torture. Public degradation meant to break a person. Across all these cases, people respond with a specific moral intensity. They do not say only, "This caused harm." They say, "This should never be done to a person." Notice the word never. Breaking a rule can sometimes be justified. Breaking a promise can sometimes be explained. But humiliation is treated differently. As if it violates a boundary that does not depend on consequences. Another clue appears in comparison. If someone scratches your car, it is frustrating. If someone vandalizes your house, it feels personal. But if someone humiliates you, the reaction cuts deeper. People say, "I felt less than human. I felt like I disappeared. I felt erased." Why this difference? From a purely physical standpoint, the body is still intact. The organism is still functioning. Yet people insist something fundamental has been attacked. Part 2. What a purely biological view says. Now let us slow down and present the biological account fairly. According to a naturalistic worldview, Humans are products of evolutionary processes. Our brains evolved to navigate social environments. Our emotions evolved to promote cooperation and survival. Our moral instincts evolved because groups that protected members outperformed groups that did not. From this view, humiliation triggers intense reactions because social standing mattered for survival. To be excluded meant danger. To be shamed meant loss of protection. To be reduced meant vulnerability. Dignity, on this account, is not a metaphysical property. It is a social construct. A useful fiction that stabilizes cooperation. When someone is humiliated, our brains register a threat to social identity. Anger and outrage are adaptive responses. They discourage behavior that undermines group cohesion. There is nothing irrational here. In fact, this explanation has real power. It explains why humiliation hurts even without physical injury. It explains why social animals respond strongly to status threats. It explains why cultures develop norms around respect. Many thoughtful atheists are satisfied with this account. They do not deny moral feelings. They explain them. So far, there is no contradiction. But now comes the quieter question. Does this explanation fully capture how people actually behave? Part 3. Where the explanation feels thin. Consider how people talk after humiliation. They do not say only, "This damaged social cohesion." They say, "That took something from me." They demand apologies even when no practical harm remains. They want acknowledgement, not compensation. Why? If dignity were only a social construct, an apology should matter only insofar as it restores reputation. But people often want something deeper. They want recognition that a wrong was done to them as a person. Another clue appears in secrecy. Humiliation hurts even when no one else knows. A private act of degradation can haunt someone for years. If the harm were purely social, why does it persist without an audience? Another clue appears in language. People say, "I was treated like an object. Like an animal. Like I didn't matter." Notice what these phrases imply. Not just that something bad happened, but that a category boundary was crossed. Person into thing. Someone into something. And that transition is treated as morally catastrophic. Why does this matter so much? Pain can be endured. Loss can be accepted. But dehumanization is described as unbearable. Part 4. Dehumanization as a special kind of evil. History gives this pattern sharper edges. Before atrocities occur, language shifts. People become numbers. Animals. Pests. Machines. This is not accidental. Dehumanization does something psychologically necessary. It removes a moral barrier. Societies seem to know this instinctively. That is why slogans appear after horrors. Never again. This must not happen. These are not strategic statements. They are moral absolutes. Notice again the language. Not impractical. Not inefficient. Unacceptable. Even in secular societies, certain acts are treated as beyond justification. And interestingly, the strongest condemnation is reserved not for killing alone, but for degrading. Torture is considered worse than death. Rape is considered worse than injury. Slavery is considered worse than exploitation. Why? Because these acts deny personhood itself. They do not merely harm a body. They deny a status. Part 5. The strange word we keep using without noticing. There is a word people use constantly in these contexts. Violation. It appears in law. In therapy. In everyday speech. Violation implies that something inviolable existed. A boundary that should not be crossed. Not because of consequences, but because of what the thing is. We do not speak this way about objects. You can violate a contract, but you do not violate a chair. Consent matters in a peculiar way here. Two identical actions can be judged oppositely depending on consent. Why? Because consent recognizes agency. Personhood. The ability to say yes or no. Again, behavior reveals something. People act as if humans are not just valuable. They act as if humans are untouchable in certain ways. Even when no law exists. Even when no audience watches. Part 6. Can atheist accounts fully carry this weight? To be clear, atheist explanations explain much. They explain why social harm hurts. They explain why cooperation matters. They explain why evolution shaped moral instincts. But there is a question they struggle to ground. Why does violation feel absolute? Why do people speak in the language of should never, not merely should not? Why does humiliation feel like a crime against something deeper than welfare? Some atheists accept this tension. They say, we cannot justify these instincts rationally. We simply have them. That is an honest position. But it leaves a quiet gap. Our lived experience treats personhood as more than a useful illusion. Our reactions assume a depth that our explanations deny. This is not a refutation. It is a pressure point. Conclusion. An open question. In everyday life, people act as if humans are not just biological entities. They act as if something about a person must not be reduced, must not be used, must not be violated. Even those who reject any higher account behave this way. The question is not, are they wrong? The question is, why does this behavior appear so stubbornly human? What does it say about us? That we cannot help but treat persons as more than things? You do not have to answer this question today. It is enough to notice it. Because sometimes, what we assume in our actions speaks louder than what we claim in our theories.